Hello guys, I am back with another episode. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and we received this message via our email address. If you have any story that you want to share with the rest of the world, please do not hesitate to contact us via our email address. The message reads like this. Hello my brother, I have recently came across your platform. My brother, I need help, but I don't know what to do anymore. My brother, my story began in 2017, but before that, I had a very poor upbringing. We used to go to bed on empty stomachs, so I was not used to a wealthy lifestyle. My brother, I am now 32 years old, and I have to sacrifice my wife and my 2 kids. My brother, it was in the year 2017. I had money problems. I could not even buy bread. I then came across this man at church. He was driving the latest BMW, and he used to donate a lot of money to the church. One day I approached him and I asked him how he got so much money, and he just told me that I cannot tell you how I acquired all of my wealth. So I started slowly becoming his friend so that eventually he could tell me how he had acquired his wealth. Eventually that man started to open up to me. This was after I had become friends with him. He told me that in order to get money, he has to take me to Nigeria. But he told me that he cannot pay for the plane ticket to take us both to Nigeria, but because I had absolutely no money, I ended up selling each and everything that I had, and I started stealing from my parents. I even stole from our own friends until I eventually got the money to travel with him to Nigeria. When we got to Nigeria, he took me to this other small village. He took me to this other witch doctor. When we got there, we had to walk on our knees and hands as if we were kind of like a dog when we were entering this hut. Then witch doctor already knew why I was there, and he immediately said that there has to be a sacrifice that needed to be done. He told me to go and buy a goat, and I had to skin it alive. My brother, after I had bought that goat, he locked me up in this dark room. At the corner of that room, there was a huge snake. This snake, it was coiled up. The witch doctor told me to do it in the center of the room. As I was busy skinning the goat, scary creatures started appearing in the room. But the witch doctor told me that to look at them and not to show any fear. And in looking at these creatures, if I were to show them any fear, they were going to kill me in that room. After I had skinned that goat, I had to bury it alive and sleep on the grave from midnight until when the sun was about to rise, and I had to be naked. My brother, after that was done, we left Nigeria to go back home. When I got back home, there was a bucket. There was a bucket underneath my bed. I didn't know where this bucket was from, but when I looked at that bucket, I saw that inside that bucket, there was a snake inside the bucket, and the snake was coiled around a lot of money. I then took that money and I spent that money. I bought everything that I ever wanted. I wore expensive clothes and drove expensive cars. My brother, the money was not finishing. It was great. I started to realize that the money was now running out, so I decided to contact that witch doctor again, but suddenly I could not get hold of him. But later that day, I was dreaming, and in that dream, an old man told me that my time was running out and a sacrifice indeed was needed. That man told me that I had to sacrifice my wife and my 2 kids because that goat that I had buried when I was still in Nigeria, he told me that it had fully decomposed. My brother, I don't know what to do because the time for me to do this sacrifice is now. I have to kill my family members because I am now broke. Please tell me what to do. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was forwarded to me by one of our admins. Strange things do happen in this world. Please let us talk about this issue in the comment section. Strange things do happen in this world. I have another message that I want to share with you guys. The second message reads like this. Good morning, my brother. My father had a lot of money and he did not go to school. He was not educated. One day we woke up and he had money. It was just an instant thing. All of a sudden, my father had money. Within a year, my father had managed to buy 2 houses and he bought those 2 houses for cash. We had a shop and our life was very perfect. We moved from a 2-roomed house. When I say a 2-roomed house, I mean a house with 1 bed for the parents and the rest of us children would be sleeping in the kitchen or the living room. So we only had 2 rooms in that house. Our lives just transformed within a day. Where my father got the money from, I do not know, but we started living a very comfortable life. For the first time, I had my own bedroom and my sisters, they had their own bedrooms. We had dogs and we used to cook a lot of meat for the dogs. That is how rich we had become. My mom said that my dad had sacrificed a man. He killed that man with his own hands. And even up until today, this thing, it still affects our lives. My sister struggled up to a point where she nearly died. When we went to the hospitals, wherever we go to, the doctors, they just say that everything with my sister is normal. Her health is perfect, but she'll be sick. Sometimes she'll be so sick that she won't be able to get out of bed. But whenever we go to the hospital, the doctor would just give my sister something like paracetamol. We ended up going to consult, and the traditional healer said that we had to pay that family, and the payment was to be done not by cows, but by a young lady. One of my father's children would have to go to the victim's family and bear children to replace the man who was slain by my dad. Unfortunately, we are not in a position to pay for my father's sin because we were not part of the deal when he sacrificed that man. Back to my story. This was something that we never dreamt of. We had employees who would come and cook for the dogs. My dad would buy lots of beef for those dogs. Our lives were just wonderful. I still remember that my father used to go with me to Enterprise so that he can buy loads and loads of beef just for the dogs. People who saw us shopping, they thought that maybe we had a restaurant or something, but what they didn't know is that all this meat that we used to buy at NTK, it was just for the dogs. I never dreamt that one day I'll be sent to boarding school, but my dad made it possible. I was just a child, and that is what I could see. Now that I am older, my mother has told me stories of my father because he is late. Our father left a generational curse in our family. My father used to sell river sand and pit sand, but all of this, it was just a front. This is what my mother told me. My mother told me that my father had dug something that looked like a grave back at the village where he was born. My father then went to buy those mobile toilets, the ones that are used when there are functions. After he had bought that mobile toilet, he just built a platform so that it can cover up the hole that he had dug up, so people never suspected anything. That mobile toilet, it was always locked. Whenever my father would travel back to the village, he was the only one who would use that toilet. But my mother told me that there was this other night when they had traveled back to the village, and what my father used to do is that whenever they would have traveled with us, or if they would have traveled alone back to the village, my mother said that she noticed that on most occasions when she would wake up, she would find out that whenever she would wake up, my father would be nowhere to be seen, until one day when she saw my father coming out of that mobile toilet with a bag full of money. When my mother asked my father where this money had came from, my father then lied to my mother that he was involved with people that were doing cash in transit heist, but it was all a lie. My mother told me that she pretended as if she had believed that my father was involved with those people that were doing cash in transit heist, but my mother knew what she was doing. My mother eventually caught my father red-handed inside that mobile toilet, and he was pulling large sums of money from underneath that mobile toilet. The man that my mother saw, his body was covered with worms, and that man was busy handing loads of cash to my father. That is when my father sat down with my mother and told my mother that indeed he was a ritualist. And when he had visited this other witch doctor, that witch doctor told him that for him to succeed in the business that he was doing, at that time, my father only had one tipper, and that witch doctor told him that for him to be strengthened in the business that he was doing, at least he needed to do some rituals. Unfortunately, for those rituals to be performed, there was a need for human body parts. That is when my father had this man kidnapped. And we don't even have an idea who this man that my father kidnapped is. All that my mother told me is that my father just hired a couple of hitmen who were not that expensive so that they can go out in the night and they can kidnap someone. But they never told my father the area where they had kidnapped that man. And when they brought that man to my father, they chopped him up and they burnt him, and his body parts was used so that my father can make a lot of money selling river sand. My mother told me that my father said that him and that traditional healer and other people who were assisting that traditional healer, they went to this river. When they were at that river, that is when they dumped the rest of the body parts from that man that my father had organized for him to be murdered. They just threw the rest of his body parts in that river. My brother, this is the secret that is in our family. The thing that concerns me is my sister. She is sick. She is always sick. And as we are speaking right now, my sister, she is only 15 years old. She doesn't even enjoy life. She is always in and out of the hospital. Please, can you post my story for me? Dear listeners, right there was a message that was forwarded to me by one of our listeners. Generational curses are for real. If you have any story or any family secret that you want to share with the rest of the world, please do not hesitate to contact one of our admins. I'll be back with another episode.